Thanks very much for the introduction. Thanks very much, Aoife, and all the team in Midlands Science for this invitation. I'm really excited to be here. I hope I don't say a lot of nonsense today, and that I can convince you a little bit what I will try to say today. So I'm just gonna share my screen with you guys. Just bear with me for a moment. Can you all see it? Mm-hmm. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks. So I would like to start. I'm going to use the case of vaccine hesitancy as an example, but this can be applied to other areas in medical science and in fact in any other areas of science. But this is an area that has struck a chord with me for several personal reasons, and so that's why I decided to focus on this. I wanted to start with this image, which maybe some of you have seen circulated on social media a few years back. And I have no idea the origin of the photo. If anyone has pointers, let me know later. But the post was claiming that this was a classic example how media can manipulate information. If you focus on the left-hand side of the picture, it could be used as an evidence of violence and cruelty. Whereas if you focus on the right side, of kindness and compassion. The real full picture, it's obviously far more complex than that, and we can speculate many things. But without the context, it's impossible. Even the full picture is already cropped, so we don't know where this is, what's happening. So it gives us very little to go on except our perceptions. So what this image, real force, teaches me is that our perception of the truth can really change depending on the perspective that is presented to us, and even from our own bias. An interesting example of this was published a few years back. This is from Our World in Data. And this is statistics on the cause of death in the US. So here on the left-hand side, these are the real causes of death. So you can see the distribution of different types. Whereas on the right-hand side, what you can see is what the media focus on. So they provided an example from two quite respectable newspapers, actually. In the middle, what you're going to see is what people actually researched on Google. So what strikes me the most is that although heart disease was causing 30% of the deaths in the US in that particular year, it was pretty much neglected. Whereas people were much focused on homicide and terrorism, which together cause less than 1% of death. So there are many explanations for this, but one that I would like to focus on is what the psychologists now are calling our negative bias. What that means is that we have a tendency of focusing on negative news. Anytime that you tune on the news, it's kind of daunting, really. It's all gloom and gloom all day. And the reason that psychologists claim we have this negative bias is that because our brains, they are wired to focus on negative news as a way of a survival instinct. What that means is that the more we pay attention to perceived dangers, the more we protect ourselves from harm. So this brings me to vaccine hesitancy. There is a lot more to it. Of course, unfortunately, we don't have time to go through it all today, but I would like to just acknowledge what's the role of the media and social media in particular into this. This is something that has been going on for the best part of the last 20 years or so, but in 2019, WHO finally added vaccine hesitancy to the list of the 10 global health threats, together with things like HIV and Ebola. The vaccine hesitancy it's a broad term, which of course includes what we know, some of you might know as the anti-vaxxer movement. So this always started actually with this man. His name is Andrew Wakefield. And in 1998, he published a fraudulent paper in a very prestigious journal called The Lancet, linking measles vaccine with autism. This got a lot of media coverage at the time. There was widespread outcry, and as a result, many parents decided that they would stop vaccinating their children. Now, 12 years later, the fraud was fully uncovered, the paper was retracted, this man lost his medical registration and everything, but by then, damage was already done. So this graph here shows us the effect of the vaccines campaign. So this is particularly the measles vaccine. So that's in the US, so they started vaccinating children at around the 60s. And as you can see, there was a dramatic drop in the number of cases in just a few years, really. So we dropped down from about 500,000 cases a year down to a few hundreds. But here on the inset, you might notice, I don't know if you can see my pointer, here on the inset, you see that from 2000, so just a couple of years after the paper was published, we started to see the cases rising again. And probably many of you have heard of measles outbreaks in big cities like New York or London. Now, I promised myself I was not going to talk about COVID, but vaccine hesitancy has a role in what we are seeing nowadays. So you see that countries like France or Italy, there's a lot of people are not keen on taking the jab at the moment. And this has much to do with this widespread information that vaccines are dangerous. So in fact, even before there was a COVID vaccine, polls suggested that at least half of the world population had concerns on taking the vaccine and were not really keen on doing that. Now, the vaccine came out fairly quickly. As you know, a lot of people are suspicious of that. Although they don't know that behind the vaccine that came out, there was 20 years of research on it. But once the vaccine came out, of course, there were some cases of side effects. And there was, again, a lot of coverage on these particular cases. So you probably heard about the blood clots and everything. And panic spread again. And people didn't want to take the jabs, and people were refusing to take the jabs. And AstraZeneca vaccine was pretty much banned from the rounds of vaccination and everything. But if we take a moment to just analyze these numbers, I like this infographic because it puts things a little bit in perspective. So it's getting back to Jack's example of the sharks. So I think we kill a lot more sharks than sharks kill us. And this is exactly the same. So here we focus on the risks of the vaccine, whereas the benefits are far greater. So if you pay attention to these numbers here, the chances of having blood clots, if you get infected by COVID, are 40,000 higher than the chances of getting blood clots from the actual jab. And a lot of things are in between this. So just common things that we have in our daily lives, like smoking or birth control pills, have a far higher risk of blood clots than any vaccine. So this brings me back to this idea of perceived danger. What we are seeing is that despite the fact that we have far more evidence of the vaccine's benefits, we are only focusing on the risks and not analyzing the bigger picture. So how is that media and social media really are influencing this? Now, for starters, social media was virtually unchecked, excuse me, virtually unchecked for many years. So anyone can write a post or make a video about their own personal opinion. And if I like that video or that post, I just share with my network, and my network share with the network, and that information, good or bad, is just amplified. So what we have is an information overload. So we are daily bombarded with all kinds of posts, videos, pictures, a wealth of things that it's pretty hard actually to deal with. Even some medical scientists now are mentioning cases of information fatigue. So we get so much that we cannot deal with it. And I find that this access to information, this overwhelming access to information has a dark side. And together with our lovely daily fix of funny cat videos, we have a lot of misleading information, hoaxes, conspiracy theories, which I'm not touching so much now, because I think Steven's going to mention this. And all this, in the end, it adds to our negative bias. So I am not trying to sell any conspiracy theories here before anyone's thinking about that. So I don't think there's a huge conspiracy plot from the media to drive us crazy. But it's really hard for scientists and for journalists to really translate what we have in the science knowledge into a language that it's easy to understand by everyone. But for example, I have recently run a workshop in science communication with medical students, and I asked them to create a headline based on scientific papers. So this paper, for example, was about use of cannabinoids to treat the form of childhood epilepsy. So what's here, don't need to worry about reading all this, but what we have here is a lot of different titles that were provided by the students. Some of them focus on, wow, that's great news, we have a new treatment for epilepsy, whereas others focus on the fact that there was a lot of side effects in the particular treatment. And this group, for example, they are brilliant. I laughed for weeks with this. They decided to give a tabloid approach and made the title that completely would mislead the reader if that was a real newspaper headline. So because the perspectives are different, and we have so much information, how can we separate the chaff from the wheat? Now, I think that a good way forward is really to start questioning the information that we receive. Does that even make sense? Like, you can use your common sense and analyze what you are hearing and reading. There are other points of view to that. So can we try to focus on different ways of looking into the same piece of information? And the most important of all, is this source reliable? So I like this example, going back to my story of the vaccine hesitancy, because this was a post a few years back, and this person said, I'm not an anti-vax, but I understand why some parents do not want those chemicals in the children's bodies. I think instead of chemical shots, the doctor should give a small piece of the virus so the body can build natural immunity, like the chickenpox play dates we had as kids. Now, I could find that his post is quite, his argument is quite compelling, or he or she, their argument is quite compelling and makes sense. And if I didn't know how vaccines work, I would share that with my network, and my network would share them with their network. And then this unease about vaccines would spread. Now, if I took the time to just go to any source of information a little bit more reliable, for example, Wikipedia, which again is not the most reliable, but a little bit better, I would have find out that his alternative to vaccination is actually vaccination. So I think that I would like to summarize this by saying that we need to be aware of our own negative biases, and that there are different perspectives, different points of view to every bit of information. Information is always the same, but the way that we take on it may be completely different from person to person, from country to country, from religious group to religious group, and etc. Also, we need to remember that translating scientific information can be very challenging, and a lot can be lost in translation in the process. And we need to get in the habit of questioning everything that we read or hear. It's not, so before sharing anything, we also need to get in the habit of checking if that's true or not. I just put here, basically here, a link, one of the main tools that are available now for fact check online. Just as a final note, there are a lot of now very interesting resources. These are people that I find very nice on Twitter for those who use them. First one, Dr. Wiles, she's from New Zealand and the author of the famous Flatten the Curve cartoons you got sick of hearing in the beginning of the pandemic. I want to look on you in Trinity College, who has a weekly program in News Talk Radio, if I'm not mistaken. For those who have kids, Amoeba Sisters is very nice with cartoons and gifs and everything. Just a few more links that are very useful as well. A lot of good scientific information being shared there. In particular, Kurs Pesat, I managed to pronounce it. I'm very proud of myself, which has very cool animations on different topics on science. And finally, I would absolutely recommend everyone to hear this podcast that I highlighted here about the very generic, about the use of internet and how internet has evolved over the years. And finally, I just want to leave you with artwork from my daughter, and I would like to thank you for your attention.